Wow, we got so much here. Trump crashes the stock market. BC's debt downgraded again. Canadians losing hope. And the BC crisis continues, and a whole bunch on election 2025. So much to talk about. We'll start in BC though. I'm Jim Check with Now Media. On the phone with me, Ian Burns, our managing editor, all the way out there in Ottawa. Look at the beautiful day in the Okanagan and our live shot here, traffic moving amazingly, and it looks like a beautiful spring day here in the central Okanagan, Kelowna. How's it looking out there in Ottawa?
It's nowhere near as pretty as that scene that you have. It's actually very sort of grey and cloudy, but it is expected to be as high as 17 today. So it's going to look ugly, but it'll feel kind of mild, I guess.
Well, the weather looks great. I don't know about everything else, but we got a double blow as S&P and Moody's downgrade BC's credit rating again, citing the ballooning deficits. An apparent lack of plan to figure out how to get out of it. That's even worse, right?
Yeah, I mean, this is like, for all the politics, it's one thing for like John Rustad or Pierre Poilievre or whoever to throw a barb at David Eby and say like, you're not doing a very good job with the economy or whatever. That's one thing. You can kind of take that with a pinch of salt, really. That's just politics. It might be true, it might not be true. But when these ratings agencies do this, I mean, this means that like the biggest nerds that you could ever imagine in your life have sat there at a desk for days and days and weeks, maybe even months, and looked at the fundamentals of the BC economy. They've looked at the budget that was put forward recently, and they've made a very sort of sober, cold-blooded judgment on the BC economy, and they basically said that it sucks. Well, I mean, maybe that's an exaggeration, but they said it's worse than it was anyway, and it was already in a bit of a rough spot. And
It,
but now
it,
they've said it's getting worse.
in their words, structural deterioration in British Columbia's credit profile, and the deficit would soar to $14.3 billion. That's 31% higher than forecast in Finance Minister Brendan Bailey's budget last month, and 57% higher than the most recent estimate of last year's deficit. So yeah, so not good at all for British Columbia. And I think the bigger problem is the revenue side. Like lots of times you can fix it with revenue. You can either fix it with cutting spending or you can fix it with increasing revenue. And the NDP definitely don't seem to ever want to cut. They balloon government. Like we've seen this over the past few years. The government side, the public sector growing at a faster rate than the private sector. And we've had Gavin Dew speak on that a number of times. But also on the revenue side, capital fleeing out of British Columbia. And we've seen that. This is way prior to Trump. We talked to forestry companies and saying that BC is no longer investable. There's lack of certainty, too much regulation, too much paperwork, and it's better to go somewhere else where it's easier to work with the government.
Yeah, I mean, it's worth mentioning as well that this is like this is quite a dramatic change in fortunes for British Columbia and also Canada in general, really. Canada for so long has been considered almost like pretty much like the best Western country in the world, maybe next to somewhere like Switzerland or something like that. I don't know. But basically like the most sensible, fiscally sensible country in the world that had really, really good banks and good sort of fiscal arrangements, not too much debt and all the rest of it. Like sort of very conservative with a small c. And British Columbia, of course, was considered one of the best of all, wasn't it, for such a long time? Like
Yeah.
this is really sad actually to look at because this was sort of something about Canada that even people that have never been to Canada have no interest in Canada but are interested in the financial world. They kind of know this about Canada that it has this very shrewd, very prudent sort of attitude towards spending and saving and so on. But alas, look at this. It's like here we are. We're heading towards the dumps. We're heading towards like European style, like pretty sort of sketchy debt ratings and really, really bad budget deficits. It's just sad, really, isn't it? But if you look at what the NDP's daddy, Jagmeet Singh, if you look at his attitude to almost anything, it's basically the government should spend more, the government should fix it, and corporations should pay for it. Capital should pay, and the people should they should get the benefits, and if it means more taxes and blah 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 and more spending, like a kind of pretty sort of old-fashioned socialist approach to economics. Unfortunately, that doesn't really work, does it? I mean, or it hasn't worked in a long time. Maybe it'll work again in the future. I don't know, but it hasn't worked in a long time. And the NDP in BC, that kind of franchise of the NDP, they adopt very similar policies, and the evidence over the last number of years seems to suggest that it hasn't worked in British Columbia either, and that it needs to be modified somewhat.
I think they've run out of ideas because, like I said, as an accountant, you have two choices there: increase revenues or increase taxes or decrease your spending, right? And they've introduced 33 new taxes since they've taken power, the NDP. So it's little room to increase taxes. They've already, BC's one of the provinces has some of the highest tax rates, and in taxes like luxury tax and property transfer tax, taxes that don't exist in Alberta. They also have a provincial sales tax that doesn't exist in Alberta. And BC and Alberta used to be a 1-2. Like sometimes BC was actually doing better than Alberta, and Alberta right now actually doing a big tax cut for their people because of the surpluses that they're running. And here we are, because we've kind of like made it really tough for the companies to go out and try to invest capital to tap our natural resources. Opposition leader John Rustad said, "This is a direct consequence of reckless spending and economic mismanagement. British Columbians are paying more and getting less, and now they're paying a price for a weaker credit rating," which means, like all that debt we have, we're going to pay more for that. So more money will go to servicing debt, because as your debt gets downgraded, your interest rates go higher.
Mm-hmm. Indeed. And I mean, there's more and more debt to come, isn't that? It's just, the longer that a deficit is run, that's going to require more and more debt to fund.
Yeah. So they have a policy that, their climate first agenda goes direct. Our natural wealth is our natural resources. That's our natural wealth. But the climate agenda that they have is in direct conflict with that. So it's really tough to drive more revenues and get more investment in British Columbia. And at the same time, it's really tough to squeeze that lemon a little bit more because you've already squeezed it with 33 new taxes. Really, really tough spot. And I think they've run out of ideas as well.
Yeah. And I mean, BC's demographics as well are like, that will, if you're economically minded, that will turn your stomach. You're going to need a sick bag nearby, because BC's demographics are just like a horror show. There aren't any children being born. It relies almost entirely on immigration to have workers, basically, so that things can be produced at a kind of even somewhat affordable price. Like BC, it's not in a position to adopt this kind of economic philosophy. I don't think it's not like it can just freely pick from the fat of the land. Like BC is in a position where I think it needs to concentrate on the fundamentals. It needs to think about how it's going to grow wealth and how it's going to get out of this trap that it's got itself in. But instead, the people in charge of British Columbia seem to be acting as though it's like, it's like a Garden of Eden, and you can just pluck what you want from the trees, and the wealth is just always there. You just need to tax the right people and that kind of thing. But I mean, the fundamentals really, really don't suggest that that's true about British Columbia.
We interviewed David Eby during the provincial election, and we put it to him on the, maybe we cornered him there. We put it to him, will you drop the carbon tax if the federal government does? And he committed to it at that point and stuck to it, which is, that's a big hole in their budget though, because that was a lot of money, because they weren't giving all of that back to British Columbians like, like the federal Liberals said they did, but that also isn't true. But tough spot for British Columbia, really tough spot. Companies don't want to invest. David Eby said the reason that people weren't getting that $1,000 rebate that he promised in the election to buy votes is because of Donald Trump, or what? No, it was two things: the dollar dropping and that investment capital fleeing British Columbia. Both of those things were happening prior to Donald Trump's trade tariffs. And actually, we'll talk about the dollar later. It's recovering. So do we get the money? I doubt it. We got lots of comments starting off the day. Glenn is saying hi from Alberta. Good morning, Glenn. And I did not go to dinner with Sophie Trudeau. Was in town last night speaking at an event. To be completely open, though, my wife did introduce Sophie last night at the event. So there you go. I didn't get to go. They wouldn't let me in the door, I guess.
And what did she have to say then? Anything interesting?
I asked Nikki, and she said she talked about yoga.
Right.
There you
I
go.
wonder if Justin was doing the yoga. Maybe that's why they split up. Not enough yoga.
There you go. They probably watched. They're probably not fans of the show, and probably watched the show and said, "No, Jim cannot attend." So there you go.
Yeah,
But
I mean, you'd think that you have something in common, a certain attitude towards a certain former prime minister, but
I
alas,
do
no.
John Chrétien, and I like yoga. There you go. So there you go.
Exactly. And you like Lululemon, the ultimate yoga
Hey,
apparel.
this shirt right here is a Start Where You Are. It's a Lululemon shirt. So there you go. Brand ambassador, also stock owner of Lululemon. Not doing well today in the stock market. 85% of Canadians think living paycheck to paycheck is the new norm, and that's not a great place for Canadians to be. This is part of the British Columbia thing. I think a lot of people, young people, their favorite song right now, and we did stories on this as well, their favorite song they're playing in their truck as they head east is Alberta Bound. And it's a good song, actually. But I
I
mean,
prefer for Alberta themed music. I prefer the old blues song as
there
sung
you go.
by Eric Clapton. Alberta, that's my favorite one. Though
There you
it's
go.
not
But
actually about Alberta, the province, we should say.
I'm just saying that a lot of people packing up and going to Alberta. We did a couple stories on it too. Like a lot of young people looking there, cheaper housing, better opportunity, better wages, and just it seems to
Lower
be
taxes.
low taxes, better future. No provincial sales tax either. Hey, you know,
Mm.
David Eby, I wouldn't put it past him that that's one thing they might ratchet up and talk about how people are spending too much and they need to cut it back. There you go. I don't want to give any ideas in case they're listening. But H&R Block did this study, and it's not a good study. More than half of Canadians, 51%, said that despite making a decent salary, it's hard to make ends meet, and 81% are concerned their income is not keeping pace with the cost of living. This whole study is on kelownanow.com. You can go read it there. 74% worry they're not putting enough money into savings. 62% don't have enough money left over the paycheck to build a nest egg. I think a lot of the young people are really disillusioned, disenfranchised. That's the tough part, right? Um,
There's a
and
particular when people wonder about the intergenerational angst that exists now, particularly when it comes around to elections. Like a lot of young people, particularly like the core worker demographic of whatever that is, like 30 to 50 or something like that, they seem to be very strongly going for the Conservatives, whereas the people who are retired, the pensionable people, they seem to want the Liberals. And there's an argument going around among sort of intellectuals and non-intellectuals about how unfair that is because these people have pensions, they benefited from a high growth society and a good economy and all the rest of it, and now they're in the eyes of some people, they're denying the young people that opportunity, while young people don't even have enough money to dream of a pension. Like a pension is that's not something that they even think about because they can't save any money. So there's a very interesting conflict there between the generations, which we've spoken about a number of times, haven't we?
yeah, and it's also if you look at which way the voters are voting too, it seems like the older generation doesn't want a lot of change, and the younger people are desperately seeking change. The study also found, and this is the one that's I find extremely troubling, that just under half, 48% of Canadians relying on their credit card rather than savings to make large purchases, and that's and installment payment plans, like going to Lululemon and making installments on a shirt. Like, I mean, that's, and, like all these easy credit options are just traps for people, right? And, spending $9 for a cup of sugar coffee and all that kind of stuff. Um, that's the tough part, right? And I don't know where that's going to change. Again, our natural wealth is beneath our feet, and for the past 10 years, we have governments, both provincially and federally, reluctant to tap that natural wealth for the benefit of our citizens.
But then, go back to that argument that these people are making that I mentioned. They look at that as kind of the older folks have kind of got theirs. They're happy. They have their home, maybe mortgage free. They have their pension. They're pretty settled, and they can now afford to think about things like, the environment or whatever it might be. These kind of issues that are of less importance to people who literally don't, like in according to this survey, literally don't have enough money to make sort of basic purchases, and they have to dip into savings or get loans for basic purchases. I mean, you can obviously see why there'd be a conflict there, and that the party that represents change, which in this case is a Conservative Party, you can see why they would attract those people, whereas the party that represents the status quo, which in this case is the Liberals, would attract the people who are quite happy with how things are going right now.
Yeah, tale of two countries, or tale of two nations, or cities, or whatever you want to call it. But there is definitely two things happening at the same time here, and it's tough for a lot of people, right? And I think we should care more about our youth than some people do, instead of thinking of ourselves all the time. I mean, for me, I worry about what we leave our grandchildren. That's, I think, is the most important thing. But
Well, unlucky for younger people, there aren't that many of them because birth rates have been collapsing. That means that the baby boomer generation is absolutely massive. It's like a huge bulge in people. So
mhm.
they have like this outsized impact on elections because obviously elections are just a head count, really.
Yeah.
And if your generation tends towards a certain set of policies and happens to be enormous compared to the other generations, then you're kind of going to get what you want, aren't you?
We do thank everybody that's commenting. We love the comments, and we try to interact as much as we can. Like, we also would appreciate if you'd like and share and subscribe for sure to the channel. We've switched it to now Media Group to kind of show that we're doing more than just a local kind of thing. Yeah, so we appreciate that. We get no funding from the government, so we get to say whatever we want. We get zero funding from the government, so we're not shilling for anybody other than ourselves, right?
But if the government does give us money, then you might notice a pretty rapid shift in the sort of things we talk about, like how absolutely fantastic the Liberal platform is.
Yeah, yeah. If they give us like 10% of the CBC budget, we'll probably let you know that we're getting it, and that all of a sudden we love a lot of the things that we talk about negatively. Like, as of right now, we're just calling it like it is. This is a travesty, and it continues to happen. We have one of our journalists working on this story, and a couple other people working on this, and we've talked about this over and over again. Lillooet again shut down, told people that they can just drive to Kamloops. Their ER shut down once again. It's the question we have is, how much does it cost for a helicopter ride? We've reached out to the mayors and stuff like that too, and they say they can use the highway, because only like from Merritt to Kelowna, like you could draw from here. Like, why aren't they just redeploying assets that they have in other places to different places, offering overtime and all that kind of stuff? It just doesn't make any sense. And Josie Osborne, the health minister, said the system is just under a lot of strain right now. Well, people bearing the strain, it seems to be it's the rural communities that are bearing the brunt of this strain, because I don't hear of any emergency departments being shut down in Vancouver, Abbotsford, Chilliwack, Langley, Kelowna, for that matter. Lillooet we
Yeah.
hear about, Merritt we hear about, Oliver we hear about, 100 Mile House.
It's just kind of like a bit, it contributes to a kind of doom loop for a lot of these places as well, doesn't it? Because they struggle anyway to attract people, a lot of these towns and villages, and they sometimes have little offers, don't they, to try and like they try and kind of advertise themselves to people as a prospective place to move. And they have population losses a lot of the time. Talking about demographics, often they just have, like a massively imbalanced population, like mostly older people and retired people. So they're kind of crying out for young people and families. But then maybe if a family has moved somewhere like Lillooet or is thinking about moving to Lillooet, why would they stay or why would they go when they see this? They see that like essentially for the last few weeks, Lillooet has not had an emergency department. It's not had emergency care. It's just not existed in real life. And the provincial government hasn't really done much about it. They've made some sort of like vague pronouncements like that, what you mentioned there, Josie Osborne, but they're not really fixing it. They're not treating it like an emergency. So in that situation, like a young family or whatever, which a place like Lillooet might sort of be begging for, really want, they're just going to say, well, we can't do this. Let's just move to Victoria or whatever, or Burnaby or somewhere.
Yeah, no, it's a tragedy for sure, and it seems to be getting worse all the time. But they did. We did the story, I think, yesterday, the day before. They do have money for consultants. I think they paid over $400,000 for a consultant to tell them how the health services can get better. I don't see it getting better, and then maybe take that $400,000 and actually put it into the front line as opposed to paying consultants. That's what a story we should try to get to too. But it's hard to get those numbers from them. Really, really hard. How much are we paying consultants? And that's federally and provincially. Consultants seem to be making lots of money, and the communities seem to be doing all the suffering.
Yeah, there's always money for them, isn't there?
One of the comments from Glenn there says, what? You guys don't get Bill C-18 checks like the mainstream media? The federal government has decided to selectively choose who gets money and selectively fund certain media outlets and then actually crush other ones. Like they took our audience of 200,000 away when they banned news on Facebook and Instagram. And that's the battle we've been fighting. We've done so many stories on it, so many stories. We've reached out. We've got letters of support from our MLAs, from our city of Kelowna here, and tons of, we've sent it to, you know, Justin Trudeau, who sent it to Pascal St. Onge, who then sent it to somebody else, and nobody. They send us a link to a website, and it's just ridiculous. And independent media getting crushed by Bill C-18, and then legacy media. You know, they were even threatened the other day by the Liberals, saying, "Watch the questioning because we can cut you off as well." It's like a comedy show.
Well, like we've been saying many times, you don't get something for nothing, and that's that's the exchange, isn't it?
Yeah.
You get money from the government, but then you're also vulnerable to that government. I mean, for starters, you're even just the most basic sense. If the Liberal Party gives you money, and then the Conservative Party says they're going to remove that policy, then you've been compromised just like that already. The media's been compromised because then they have a dog in the race. Their own lives are affected by who wins the election, and so quite naturally, they're going to be instinctively more likely to support the party that is going to continue to give them money.
Our stand on this is that we believe that no media should get public funding from the government. We believe media should be independent and free to operate. But they've also, at the same time, taken away our freedom by taking away our audience with this Bill C-18. The only G7 nation that does not allow news to be put on Facebook and Meta. For us, it was a symbiotic relationship. We gave them our news on their platform, and they gave us traffic. And now they've taken away that. News outlets across Canada, we say this over and over again, all news outlets across Canada have lost 50% of the traffic, and some have lost over 50% of the revenue, and close to 100 have closed since Bill C-18, and more to come here, 3 more to be lost here in the Lower Mainland in May, and likely more to come. And then CBC asking for 400 million, like a 33% increase in their budget. And Pascal St. Onge, as she's walking out the door, says, wow, let's double it. Never mind a 33% increase. So talking about, like she's saying, talking about close to a $3 billion budget for CBC. So if that's what we want, there we go, right?
But I mean, like I think there should be some kind of a conference or something convened, or some kind of like summit convened where every responsible person in Canada from all the parties and all the rest of it come together and say, let's make an agreement that we can't do this anymore because we've compromised the media. And that's precisely what the Liberals have done here. They're the ones that have introduced change. It's not the NDP, it's not the Green Party, it's not the Bloc, and it's not the Conservatives. It's the Liberals that have changed this situation compared to how it previously, the previous settlement that was in place. They've come in and they've given more than $1 billion to the media in subsidies and various programs. They've come in and they've compromised this system. So rather than it being like, the parties shouldn't get into a situation where they almost like bid, like it's an auction, and they bid to win the favor of the media, because that's just a sickness. Your society is sick if that's happening, because they're doing that to try and win favorable coverage. The whole thing is terrible. It prevents candidate from having free media, a
I,
neutral media. It's a
I,
tragedy for this country.
I don't think we would have had 10 years of liberal rule if the media was free to challenge them. I think that, like Justin Trudeau got a free ride in many of his things, scandals and that, because the media was definitely reliant on federal funding. Let's move on, though. We can spend the whole day there. We got West Side Road closed again due to a massive slide. We got lots of pictures to show you. That's an aerial shot given to us by the ministry. That's that mudslide. And we got another map here to kind of show you where it's at here. So that it's across kind of like from McKinley Landing. It's on the left side of that map there, on the West Kelowna side of that map. So that road is now closed in that area. And another image there just showing you what it looks like when you're standing on the ground from it, and then just as like some of that slop actually ended up into the lake there in the next image there. So we got a quick video to show you. Our journalist Kent Mulgat went out to the scene there and talked to the fire chief out there.
Is blocked off here. How big is this slide?
So the slide is approximately 150 feet long.
Wow. And so is it the kind of slide where it carves up the road, or is it just debris on top of the pavement? What do you know?
So the majority of it, there is debris on the top, but part of West Side Road is eroded.
So if it's deemed safe, would traffic still be able to get by on this eroded road?
No, not currently.
So it's going to need some repairs.
It is going to need repairs, and Ministry of Transportation is on scene, and they'll be working on it as soon as it's safe.
There was a bit of scary talk there about, there had been some people kind of making their home around there at some point, and so you had to take a look and make sure that, no people were affected by this. Does it look like we're in the clear there?
When we first arrived on scene, there was a report that somebody could be camping in the area. So Wilson's Landing and Northwest Side Fire Rescue searched where it was safe. We contacted our CMP, who showed up with a thermal imaging drone, and they flew the area. It didn't look like anybody was in the area last night. During first light this morning, we went up in a helicopter. They flew the drone again, and it still does not look like there's somebody down there, but currently COSAR is going to search the area just to make sure.
Have you spoken to anyone with the expertise to know how long it would take to fix a roadway like this and get traffic flowing again?
You'd have to speak to Ministry of Transportation. It's hard to say right now until they actually get in there.
Right, terrific. Thanks for this, Ross.
There you go. We'll keep following that story until that road's open again. We're going to move on to the election coverage that we're doing here. We're actually going to be here for election coverage when on election day on April 28th. We'll be there the whole time, but we're going to run our little election intro here. There you go. We're going to start off with a poll. And this poll is kind of different than all the other polls we've seen lately. This one's showing the Conservatives actually gaining some ground, but going back to where it was. So this is the first Conservative lead since the election call, because they had lost. They had such a huge lead, and then when Carney was kind of like coronated there, they lost all that ground, and then they were actually like way behind, and it looked like a super majority for the Liberals. And again, different polls show different things, but this is a poll here by Innovative Research.
Yeah, I mean, you're right to say that it's an anomaly. They also they put something out a few days ago, unless that is the same one, and it you look at it compared to all the other polls, and it is quite literally a single drop of blue in a sea of red, because every other poll puts the Liberals considerably ahead, and it seems to be settling at around sort of 8 or 9 points now. But still relatively early days in the election. There's still a few weeks left, and obviously the debates as well. I mean, that might change things.
I think the debates will be a big thing for sure, right? Lots of chatter out there saying, because we'll talk about it in a bit here. We actually won't jump ahead, but Blanchette coming out, Bloc Québécois leader, saying Carney copying Conservative policies. So there's another person accusing him of taking the policies of Pierre Poilievre.
I feel like that's almost like that can be safely removed from the realms of opinion. It's just a fact. I don't think that they're not trying to hide it or anything like that.
Nah.
They've quite transparently just taken the policies. But I feel like he said, maybe the word copying isn't quite right. It's almost like they've been forced by, as we've discussed many times, by Pierre Poilievre's success as an opposition leader has forced the Liberal Party to adopt quite a lot of conservative policies. That's kind of how I would phrase it.
I guess
But I mean, they haven't been punished for it, though, have they? Which is something else we've mentioned a lot of times. And I'm looking at those polls. The Canadian people, if anything, seem to quite like that they've done this.
yeah, I've heard some people say, well, why? There's no point in voting Conservative now because the Liberals are just taking their policies. But I guess the question I would put back to them is, will they follow through with them?
Yeah, that's what you should always have that on your mind. You should always think like, does the person promising me this actually believe in it? Because that has an enormous effect on whether or not it's going to happen. So if you're really pro pipeline or something like that, you're pro natural resources, and you say, well, look, Mark Carney said he wants to make us a conventional energy superpower and all this kind of stuff. Like, I would caution doubt. I would caution. I would suggest that you don't necessarily take that wholeheartedly and believe everything that he says, because there are many different ways to implement that kind of policy as well. So he might say, all right, let's get this Energy East thing done on day one. Let's say he wins the election, Carney, and he comes out and says, all right, Energy East, let's do it. And then loads of people complain and there's a court challenge. Carney then in that situation might say, oh, well, at least I tried, fellas. Let's move on to windmills. That's because he doesn't really believe in it. Whereas somebody like Pierre Poilievre, he might run into that same obstacle, a court challenge, and then say, no, I'm never giving up. I am never going to give up. I'm going to keep fighting. I'm going to keep pushing. Because Pierre Poilievre has been talking about this since he was, a child, like quite literally a child. So
Yeah.
he obviously believes this.
Yeah,
Whereas Carney maybe doesn't.
well, they've spent the last 10 years fighting against these same policies that now they seem to be promoting, including the removal of the carbon tax. There was a piece that was run on CTV on the carbon tax, talking about all the benefits beyond just the decrease of the gas pump. That'll be cheaper food because it'll be less transport costs, cheaper everything. And I'm just like, you mean all the stuff we've been talking about, and the ones that like people were screaming and saying there is no compounding, there is no inflationary pressures because of the carbon tax. All of a sudden, those inflationary pressures are going to go away because the Liberals magically made it all go away, and they're taking credit for it. I mean, I guess to their credit, great marketing, right? They've taken credit for something that Pierre Poilievre campaigned for and actually won.
Yeah, well, like we said yesterday and earlier this week, like it's actually just like good politics, isn't it? And this is the thing, like Pierre Poilievre, considering he has however many years, two decades worth of experience in politics, he's kind of being outmaneuvered by an absolute novice. Although I wouldn't say it was Carney who's doing this; it's the people behind
I
Carney.
think Katie Telford is like the wizard behind the curtain there, right? And I think a lot of people don't realize the magic she did for Justin Trudeau for those 10 years too. But for anybody that wants to see Pierre Poilievre, he's coming to the Okanagan this weekend. He will be in Penticton at 1704 Government Street at 3:30. Anybody that wants to go there can go to the CPC website and register to show up there. So that's the only leader so far that's, since the election's been called, that's made its way into the Okanagan. So we shall see.
I'm not sure. Like, I really don't understand why he's going to Penticton. I know he has like a personal attachment to Penticton. He told us that when we interviewed him.
Yeah, we interviewed him there.
That we
I
had
think
with him.
He spent summers there.
Yeah, but I'm not quite sure why he's chosen that. If he's going to come to the Okanagan, considering that Dan Albus and Tracy Gray, both of their seats are considered pretty much like toss-ups. I know Kelowna is, with Tracy Gray's, is considered a toss-up according to the polls. So you'd think he would want to go there and make sure that Tracy Gray wins in Kelowna, considering she's actually one of his close associates as well.
If you read our comments there, Glenn says he's got some beachfront property at Zama Lake. I know Zama Lake very well, so there you go. Zama City, right? And Rainbow. I know the area, so there you go. you can hit him up on that. I think this is that clip here. We're going to play this clip here. I think this is that CTV clip, actually.
The consumer carbon tax was scrapped, and as CTV's Alex Carper reports, it won't just make gas cheaper.
This is no April Fool's joke. Many Canadians seeing significant drops at the pump. Prices in the Greater Toronto area fell almost 20 cents overnight to 136.9. Drivers on the prairies and in Atlantic Canada also seeing similar results. Quebec is now the only province that hasn't abandoned carbon pricing, but most of the country will see savings, and not just on gas. Groceries could see a drop too. For example, grocer Munther Zeed says he estimates he'll be able to reduce prices in the range of 10 to 50 cents per item.
There you go. You can go to CTV and watch that full clip there. But look at that. All of a sudden, the prices are going to come down on everything because of the carbon tax being removed from the pump. Who would have thought that we live in the second
But
largest...
we were told by experts that it had no effect on that kind of thing, weren't we? I mean, are you trying to tell me that the experts were wrong on this occasion?
Yeah, we were told that it didn't lead to inflation, but who would have thought that, I think we put it out there, that we live in the second largest landmass in the world, and we transport all our goods across this vast nation with semi-trucks and trains, and both of which burn diesel, which even had a higher carbon tax than the consumer carbon tax that was on the regular fuel. And, you know, the trains, tractors, and there's no alternative for that. So, yeah, you know, that was one of the things that we pushed for and say, just remove it off of the commercial trucking and stuff like that, and that would really help. But because, you know, when you get a shipping bill, typically it says in the shipping costs, and then there's another line there that says carbon tax, and they charge for that carbon levy or whatever you want to call it. So now all of a sudden, now that it's gone, they're claiming all these good things that are going to happen from removing it. But while it was there, it had no effect, and Canadians got back more than they paid. So they're not talking about that, how Canadians are now not benefiting from getting more back than they pay.
I mean, the dishonesty that's come from the people that call themselves experts. I mean, can you imagine calling yourself an expert in this day and age? That's one thing I would say. It's almost like a term of abuse at this point. But anyway, the people that call themselves experts, like, how many more defeats can they actually take? Like,
Yeah.
I'm just thinking, just totally off the top of my head, like I'm thinking about during COVID, how it was basically, it was like a social crime, wasn't it, to say that it was the virus had leaked from a lab in Wuhan. Now, apparently, of course, that's completely safe to say because it's true, and basically every organization that's investigated it says that happened. It's like, here we are now with the carbon tax. Is there anything else? How about the actually another one would be Mark Carney getting rid of the capital gains hike that the Liberals put in, and then now he comes out and says we don't want to stifle investment, or, like, you know, that might have restricted investment. I thought we were told that wasn't going to have a serious effect on investment. You know, it's just like, how many times are we going to hear this nonsense, and then it gets swept away, and it's like it never happened.
Shouldn't CTV have went out and asked the Liberals and the people, like, what are you going to do with all that money? You were getting more money back now that they scrapped the carbon tax. How are you going to make do? Because they did many stories on how Canadians get more back than they pay, but I didn't see anything in that segment that said Canadians now left worse off because of the scrapping of the carbon tax. Hey, don't you think that would be a fair thing to say? Because I mean, they promoted that Canadians get 80% of Canadians get more back than they pay. And all of a sudden, it's just like, you know, like they're handing out candy, and no mention of, you know, the Canadians obviously not getting back more than they pay.
And Justin Trudeau, if you remember, on a number of occasions said what you said. The vast majority of Canadians actually get more back than they pay. So it's a benefit. It's actually more of a benefit. He was trying to make it seem like it was like some sort of generous gift, like some sort of welfare that everybody was subscribed to. But then he also said a number of times that the people that don't benefit really are the ones that have like a swimming pool and 5 SUVs and a mansion and all kinds of things, just like straight up class war stuff, like class politics. So I guess now that the Liberals have cut this, it's those people that they're the ones that are doing well then. It's a good time to be somebody that has a swimming pool and loads of SUVs and a mansion. So is that who the Liberals want to, that's who they want to give gifts to?
Well,
That's
there
who
you
they want to
go.
look after?
There's a CTV CBC assignment for you. Go out and find out how the Liberals are now favoring the rich, the people with the 5 SUVs and the swimming pools, and taking away from the people that need it most, the people that were getting more back than they spent. But, you know, like the lady, I think it was Mona, a Liberal MP, saying yesterday how great it was. She was at the gas pumps all decked out in her Canadian mittens and everything, talking about what a great thing Mark Carney did. Well, according to their past stuff, they've taken away money from 80% of Canadians. So there's that.
But it's amazing, isn't it, how the narrative changes and everyone in the media seems to just go along with it like it never happened.
Yeah, and we don't get any money, so we don't have to. So there's that.
Yeah.
And this is a Holly Dones Blacklock story. We have a deal here. We can talk about these stories. The Prime Minister just recently lobbied the mayor of Beijing. Lots of ties with China. Prime Minister Mark Carney, only weeks before seeking Liberal leadership, lobbied Beijing's mayor to deepen our cooperation. And we keep talking about how China is our real enemy. And here we are talking about deepening our cooperation. And we have like Chinese police departments here. We just got rid of a bunch of MPs because of Chinese interference and all that stuff. So which is it, I guess, is the question.
It's also murky, isn't it? And we keep hearing as well, don't we, from a lot of people about how, like, I should say a lot of sort of serious people, how we're going to have to turn to China as a market now and that kind of thing. But that's a risky game, of course. The Chinese are a very complicated partner to do business with. That's kind of why this has all happened in the first place, is because of China's.
They had a bounty out for one of our MPs. They had a bounty out for one of our MPs.
That's the least of it, you know. Yeah, they executed 4 Canadians not so long ago. But if you just stick to the economics, you know, the Chinese, they were allowed into the World Trade Organization about 20 years ago, 25 years ago. And they've, like, obviously to become a member of the World Trade Organization, and there are huge benefits attached to that. Like, you know, much lower tariffs than you would otherwise have. To become a member, you have to agree to all kinds of rules, obviously, about like you're not allowed to dump things, you're not allowed to manipulate currency, and China just does all that stuff, you know, and has always done that. They mass produce things like electronics or EVs or whatever it is, and then they dump them on markets. They kill the companies that exist there in those markets, and then they take over as the primary supplier. I mean, it's a very dangerous thing to do. So I would hope that Mark Carney, with all his connections to China, isn't thinking of causing up to China, because they would come into the Canadian economy like a bull in a china shop, wouldn't they?
Yeah,
It's an accidental pun there.
Carney highlighted Brookfield Asset Management's keen interest in seizing development opportunities in China, further expanding its business in Beijing and deepening cooperation with relevant partners in areas such as green finance, fund management, infrastructure investment, said the mayor's office, the Beijing mayor's office. Carney has to come clean. He has to come clean with Brookfield Asset Management. He has to disclose, because this is now all these ties with China and all this stuff. He needs to come clean for Canadians. This is what the media should be going after right now. They should be asking this. So here's the Beijing mayor coming out and saying this. So, and this isn't like 2 years ago. This was just weeks before he was seeking the Liberal leadership. He lobbied the Beijing mayor.
Yeah, and we're not really hearing this. We're not hearing a lot about this, are we? I wonder if it's something to do with, you know, that world famous Canadian politeness, and they don't want to step over a red line, which is like you don't discuss certain countries and certain people because that's just rude. It's like offensive to foreigners or something like that. But I don't know. I mean, I feel like if Carney was this closely linked to the United States, for example, and this friendly to the United States, I feel like there would be a lot more scrutiny. But for some reason, because it's China, it's like a sensitive subject for a lot of people, isn't it?
Yeah, we got a clip here to play regarding the tariff things yesterday. This is Mark Carney's initial reaction.
Je vais prononcer quelques mots. So President Trump has just announced a series of measures that are going to fundamentally change the international trading system. Now, in doing so, he has preserved a number of important elements of our relationship, the commercial relationship between Canada and the United States. But the fentanyl tariffs still remain in place, as do the tariffs for steel and aluminum. As of this evening, the tariffs on automobiles will enter into force, and the U.S. has signaled that there will be additional tariffs in so-called strategic sectors, pharmaceuticals, lumber, and semiconductors. So we're in a situation where there is going to be an impact on the U.S. economy, which will build with time. In our judgment, it will be negative on the U.S. economy. That will have an impact on us. But the series of measures will directly affect millions of Canadians. We are going to fight these tariffs with countermeasures. We are going to protect our workers, and we are going to build the strongest economy in the G7. In a crisis, it's important to come together, and it's essential to act with purpose and with force, and that's what we will do.
And you said you had some other developments there just recently.
Yeah, well, he's now come out and he's put on a sort of matching auto tariff, which is means 25% tariff on all vehicles imported from the US that aren't compliant with the trade deal, the CUSMA. And he's said a lot more like that, really, what we just heard there about how it's fundamentally changing international trade and that kind of malarkey. And also Pierre Poilievre has come out and said something on this subject, which is he wants to get rid of GST on Canadian-made cars.
So again, he must be
would be
watching
pretty
our show.
huge.
Hey, watching our show, right? Because we pitched that. There you go.
Yeah.
We
Well,
actually
I mean,
sent
that
that in.
actually would be massive because
Yeah.
the kind of cars that Canada makes, it's like some of the cars that you'll see in the street constantly, like including the CRV, the ubiquitous CRV. And I think because he listed the cars, Pierre Poilievre, I think he also listed the RAV4, which is, I believe that's like the #2 best-selling car in Canada or something like that, after the Ford F-150. But I don't think they make that in Canada, so that would be a bit more expensive.
I would say, though, that one of the big dangers that's not being talked about, and like Stellantis has shut down their factory for a couple of weeks to look at this, is if the Liberals win and they continue with their EV mandate, I would believe that most of the automakers in Canada will leave for the US because there's no EV mandate down there anymore. And a lot of the legacy automakers, the Ford, the GM, the Hondas, they just don't have an EV lineup right now that really could take over like the bulk of their production. So they're going to leave anyway, and that's not being talked about. If the EV mandate is continued in Canada, I don't see nobody's talking about removing it other than Poilievre. If they continue with that EV mandate, these auto manufacturers that everybody seems to be fighting so hard for, including Doug Ford, they're leaving anyway. Stellantis has already said that. So there you go.
Yeah, I mean that is really kind of tying your hands behind your back a little bit, isn't it, when you try and compete? But I would suspect that this is going to be something that they'll quietly get rid of. Maybe they'll do it after
Will they?
in their mind, after they win the election, so that they can maintain the Green support up to that point.
I mean, we just heard that he just lobbied Beijing for green stuff. Anyway, and this last piece on China here, there's an opinion piece written in the National Post showing Mark Carney's connection with. So some of the media is starting to pick up on that. Obviously, the National Post definitely on the other side of that spectrum. There you go.
Yeah, National Post. I mean, it seems to me like the majority of their stories are just opinion columns, aren't they? And I'm not sure how much of an effect that's going to have on the election, because most people know that the National Post is pretty conservative leaning, to put it lightly. But yeah, I mean, it's good that at least there is an area of the media that is scrutinizing Carney on this.
Danielle Smith coming out on in her own tweet there, saying that was a big win yesterday for the because most of the CUSMA was adhered to. So she said it's a big win. Some business leaders in Canada reacted with consultation despite the country's exemption from the U.S. Liberations Day announcement yesterday. Said it was like dodging a bullet into the path of a tank. You know, some people are saying, but a lot of people out there are also saying that Carney's platform of trying to drum up the Trump tariffs as the thing that we need to bind together for, a lot of that was taken away yesterday when Canada didn't get targeted with a lot of it. So that remains to be seen, I guess, as this thing starts to play out. It'd be good to see what actually is and what is the economic impact of what has been put on the table. And right now, we don't really have that.
I mean, it's very hard as well if you go back to the politics, it's very hard to know how to react to this, really, because in a way, I mean, obviously it's bad with cars. That's pretty upsetting, and but that's very murky, like you said. Nobody really knows what that's gonna actually turn out to be. That's really confusing, the auto side. But and obviously it's bad news for like lumber and all the other bits that aren't covered by that trade deal. But generally speaking, when you look at how the rest of the world has been treated, sort of touch wood, but we have kind of got a pretty good deal, haven't we, compared to the rest of the world? So it's funny. It's like, what do you do in that situation? Do you just kind of like shut up and hope that he forgets Canada exists, which American presidents have done many times in history? It's just like a country that they spend no energy whatsoever on. Or do we keep making a noise and try and say no, like we want everything cleared? It's a predicament, isn't it, in political terms, but also in diplomatic terms. What is the best path?
Well, he's even losing support in the Senate and that from senators and on beating up on Canada. So I mean, it's maybe something that pressure from the different states and that has causing him to kind of like look past Canada as well. And I think a lot of that has come into play, and say because a lot of businesses on both sides of the borders heavily rely on each other. So it just makes sense. So anyway, we're going to move on because we got lots to get through. We were going to play this clip here, this mocking, this hour's 22 minutes, but we're going to leave that. You can go find it on the internet if you want to see it. It's kind of funny, but it's kind of creepy at the same time. But 28 MPs signed genocide pledge, and that, like Jagmeet Singh front and center on that, and former Liberal cabinet minister among 28 MPs to sign a campaign pledge accusing Israel of genocide. The Palestinian platform was drafted by a coalition of anti-Israeli groups, including the Canadian Federation of Students and Queers for Palestine. There you go, and it says Canada.
Queers for Palestine. That's always a good laugh, isn't it? Queers for Palestine. Obviously, you wouldn't want to go to Palestine, or at least certainly not the Gaza Strip, because the government there would probably kill you for being gay. But forget that little detail.
So Singh says Canada must call for a ceasefire and end the killing of innocent civilians in Gaza immediately. He said that on October 16th, 9 days after the Hamas terrorists killed and kidnapped Jews in Israel. And you can actually go and find this on Blacklocks there. You can subscribe. It's only like $300 a year, $314 a year. So a bunch of New Democrats signed it. And quite a few Liberal MPs signed it. Not one Conservative or Bloc Québécois signed that agreement. Also, Jagmeet Singh was doing he did some kind of like promo video with a young lady who's also has an OnlyFans account and getting beat up a lot on the internet for that. For like, they're describing her as, well, OnlyFans, everybody knows kind of what OnlyFans does, right? And Jagmeet looking for different types of voters, I guess.
Well, he's got to get somebody to vote for him. It doesn't look like anyone else is.
Yeah, so you can go find that. It's quite funny, actually, if you go find it out. We were going to play it, but we have so much to get through today. And I thought we need a little bit of pride in Canada, and we're big Canadian promoters here. We love Canada. Somebody accused us once of saying that we wanted to sell out to Trump, which would be completely the opposite. But I wanted to play this rendition of the Canadian national anthem at a rally here. You can guess who it was. Well, let's go play that clip here. There you go. That gives me shivers. Any guesses of which rally that was
Interesting
at?
using the phones like that rather than a lighter. Suppose nobody has lighters these days.
Yeah, nobody's doing the cigarette. Well, some people probably still are. Any guess where that rally was?
I think it might be a certain French-sounding guy's rally.
Yeah, it definitely was a Pierre Poilievre rally. Definitely a very pride nationalist rally. There you go.
They also sang it. He did a speech in Toronto. I think it was yesterday, and he got somebody up on stage to sing it before he appeared. They're clearly trying to emphasize the patriotism, but it's in a way like Pierre and the Conservatives have just been completely blindsided by all this, haven't they? Because before this happened, I think most people kind of just took it for granted that the Conservative Party was the more kind of patriotic party. If anything, they were kind of attacked sometimes by the Liberals and the NDP for being like maybe a little bit too patriotic.
Yeah.
And then this all happens, and suddenly Poilievre equals Trump, and he's not patriotic, and now the Liberals and the NDP are the patriots. It's
yeah, I mean,
that's a very big surprise, isn't it?
Pierre and the Conservatives were attacked when they were canceling Canada Day events and stuff like that across Canada, saying that Canada was a post-nationalist state, and that we need to go past that. And all of a sudden, everybody wants to drape the flag around themselves and make it seem like they never left. So anyway, foreign legal costs.
Elections, eh?
Another Holly Dome Blacklock story. Foreign legal costs up 378%. In Canada, and that has a lot to do with that. So that's up from $11 million to $55 million to support delivery of immigration and refugee legal aid services over the long run. So that's tying up our courts and definitely costing a lot here. So, yeah, so that has to do with the record immigration numbers that have been part of Canada's policies the last little while. That's stressed housing. That's why we have a housing crisis, and stressed healthcare. That's why we have a healthcare crisis too. Like, we just don't have enough to go around.
Yeah, sadly.
Signs point to a possibility of early fire seasons in parts of BC, though. No, I don't know if Rommel has the picture there, but see if he can scramble to find it while we talk about BC Wildfire Services closely monitoring conditions for signs of what kind of wildfire season could be, we could expect across BC here. Prolonged drought conditions are impacting parts of Prince George and the Caribou Centres. Long-term weather forecasts currently indicate a warmer than normal wet trend heading into the spring. So yeah, so there you go. It could be a rough season for BC. We need to spend more on mitigation. The heart of our wildfire efforts is in the hands now down to the brave members of the BC Wildfire, says Ravi Parmar, the new Minister of Forests. And we spoke with Ravi Parmar, and we also spoke to the previous Forest Minister. And when we did all these forestry stories, we spent so much on wildfire fighting and very little on mitigation. So definitely need to kind of like flip that, but tough to do when they have a different agenda, and our forestry companies kind of being left out of that equation as well.
It doesn't help that every time there's a fire or a flood or anything like that, it's almost there's a kind of shrugging of the shoulders from a lot of people, and they just say, "Well, that's climate change. So now what we have to do is completely deindustrialize and revolutionize our economy. That's the only way to stop wildfires." So I feel like that response is kind of you accept defeat almost when you respond like that. You don't even try. What's the point in
Yeah.
trying to clear away the forests or fix flood protection systems or anything like that? Why bother if it's climate change? And like it's almost like saying God did it, isn't it? And the only way to stop it is to sacrifice another 1,000 bullocks or something like that.
So Finland has a similar climate to us in the northern parts, and also a similar type of forest, and they have very little, negligible forest fires because they actively manage their forests, and their forests are very young. I did a lot of these stories. You go back on our site, and you can find all these stories that I did with, colluding with Kofi, with forestry companies, and all that stuff. We talked about it, and it just seems to be. And we had an interview with Premier David Eby on it as well. And he said, yeah, we need to do more, Jim, like permitting. We can't, the mills are leaving because they can't get permits. And I think one of our viewers said that the mill in Merritt closed. Yeah, I interviewed the VP of AP Planers, the last mill there. They closed the door in Merritt there. And, they couldn't even get permits to cut burnt wood. And again, during the election, they all recognized that was the problem. But I don't hear of any solutions coming. It's great to recognize the problem, but then let's talk about some solutions as well. There you go. Markets. Donald Trump crashing the markets there with his basically worldwide tariff thing. Markets down dramatically. And that's
pretty massive, isn't it? And it's everywhere, every country, every market, it's all down. And that's obvious. They must have known that was going to happen because he's thrown a gigantic
they got some
sort of wrench into the international trading system. They probably made a count for this.
They got some pretty smart market people working there. That they knew this was coming, so. There you go. Markets smacked today, big time, big smack, and all across the board though too, right? So, and they did release their official tariff formula as well. Put simply, U.S. trade deficit times with X country divided by the U.S. imports from X country divided by 2. There you go. And easy to figure out. You just got to do that equation there on the bottom, right?
Yeah. Well, it is actually. I mean, they're taking a lot of heat for that because people are saying that it's actually, well, number one, it's not reciprocal, and it isn't. Clearly, it's not. But also, people are kind of coming out and saying it's kind of a stupid way to do it. It's like back of a napkin kind of thing because it's like, what's the trade deficit? All right, how much do we import from them? Okay, divide the deficit by what we import, and then half that, and then turn that into a percentage, and that's what we're going to tariff people.
I'm looking at the markets right now, and they haven't recovered. You know what I mean? They're still down quite a bit here. So, yeah, I mean, we got something to play here at the end in a couple seconds now. Even gold got smacked. Even gold, like everything, when things go down dramatically like that, all of a sudden it's a liquidity crisis, and things start to, like they call margin because a lot of stuff is bought on margin, right? So gold down about $27 this morning. It was down more for a while, but it has recovered from that. I think it went as low as 30.51 this morning US, but it's recovered quite a bit of that already. So gold still looks like very much the trade. Bitcoin got hammered as well. Bitcoin losing all that ground. It was kind of like banging on the door of like 90,000, set back all the way to 81,000. So, but again, that's kind of like the base right now. It's where it's kind of like banging around there. So Canadian dollar, we said this yesterday. The Canadian dollar up this morning over like a huge jump when you talk about dollar reaction, 71 cents. And a lot of that has to do with the US dollar actually falling as opposed to, the Canadian dollar gaining all that ground though too, right? So there you go. And we said that yesterday, the Canadian dollar, when I was looking at those tariffs, didn't think Canada was going to suffer from it. So there you go. Canadian dollar knew before most people did.
Yeah, well, I mean, the companies that are going to suffer the most, and they are going to suffer enormously, are the companies that are basically exclusively in China, Vietnam, basically the ones that the people that offshored and went to East Asia to produce things. And I'm just looking now at trading economics. One of the biggest losers of all is Ralph Lauren, and then Best Buy as well. They're obviously these are companies that they import a lot of their stuff from Vietnam actually and China, and you know they're just buggered, aren't they? Because I mean, how can they possibly? How are they going to get around this? I don't know. Like when it comes to clothes manufacturing, you know, producing clothes, like that's not something. I don't think that's something you can really do in the US. So how are they going to do that? I mean, it's just, I think clothes are just going to end up being a lot more expensive.
The dollar now higher than it was since back in December. Somebody better get Premier Eby on the phone so you can hand out that $1,000 because that was one of your excuses that the dollar was plunging. Now it's up. So where's the money?
Yeah.
Where's the beef, right? And here's a clip here from Tom Lee and saying, you know, like when people panic, this is, let's play this clip here from Tom Lee.
You know, we don't want investors to be panicking now or rage selling. We've had a very painful drawdown, and I know we're facing this huge uncertainty that may not end tomorrow, might last months. But like the other declines in stocks, like the one last year or the ones in 2022, the ones who could endure that short-term pain and took advantage of those declines are going to have good opportunities.
Yeah, what if things are different, though?
There you go. And that's usually what happens. Right now, you're seeing this big smack, like usually with big drops, like history has shown, the big drops are opportunities for lots of people. I never heard the term rage selling, though. There you go, rage selling.
That guy did sound a little bit like the, you know, Saddam Hussein's propagandist there, didn't he? Where he's like, everything's in order, don't worry, we're going to get them, we'll chase the Americans out of Baghdad in a few hours. Because obviously this guy has a horse in the race, doesn't he? Because he's a fund manager, so he doesn't want people to sell. He doesn't want people to freak out.
I actually follow Tom Lee, and he is one of the better ones. So there you go. There you go. In our AI and tech world, Alibaba prepares new model to compete with DeepSeek. So Chinese ramping up so much in the AI world, so much in the AI world. They're really, really moving fast in the AI world. But Alibaba got lots of money too, deep pockets, right? So, and they're talking about releasing their new Gwen 3. Everybody's got a name, right? So there you go. It's a fast-growing Chinese AI firm. So China definitely going all in on. That's when lots of people talk about we need to slow down this AI thing. And you ask me, or you tell me, do you think China's going to slow down investment in AI, or Russia for that matter?
Yeah, certainly not. Though I wonder how much capital they're going to have lying around if they can't sell into the American market anymore.
Hey, but they might sign an agreement that says they're willing to slow down, right? Just like they do with
oh, definitely.
Where they say, well, we'll adhere to the climate goals, except we're going to do ours in 2070, but you guys go ahead and do 2030. We'll be right there behind you.
Yeah, we just need to knock up a few more thousand coal power plants, but we'll catch up, don't worry.
Yeah, you go ahead and you start us off. Show us how it goes. Yeah.
Starting with you, Canada. You have to start.
Yeah. What was there? Wasn't it Klaus Schwab that said that Justin Trudeau was his star pupil, and that he's, what was the word he used? Infiltrated or penetrated?
I believe it was infiltrated or penetrate. Yeah, that was it, wasn't it?
I think he said that, you know, I won't do the accent, but he penetrated the Canadian cabinet as well as his star pupil Justin Trudeau. So there you go.
Yeah, it was. I've just to make absolutely sure it's that is what he said.
You got
they
that.
They have penetrated the cabinet.
There you go. You did the accent, not me.
I can't resist. He is just such a hilarious caricature, that guy.
he is like Mike Myers, actually. They said maybe they should get Mike Myers. He could go along with Mike Myers and do the thing there.
He obviously modeled himself on Dr. Evil, didn't he?
He did for sure. Maybe it's like you said, it's just a bad movie, and you're the star in this kind of like tragedy, like a Shakespearean tragedy.
Yeah.
Google's AI not so bright. It's kind of like Apple's AI. They definitely not having a great time. Their AI mistakenly presented an April Fool's prank as real news. There's an April Fool's joke, right? They actually took a journalist Ben Black story and put it on an actual news site, and there you go.
Wow.
Google AI making a mess as well as usual.
It's not cool, is it? They also, Apple News as well, were in hot water not so long ago because they were getting headlines completely wrong from like stories from like the BBC and stuff, and then pushing that to people's phones. It was like totally wrong. It was like saying, I don't know what it was, like that the Pope had died or something. It's like just absolute like fake news. They need to sort that out.
Yeah, somebody just mentioned, Misty here said Chrystia Freeland was on the board of the trustees of the WEF. And when she ran for the Liberal leadership, she quickly had her name scrubbed from that site. But they were very proud of it when they were running government, though. Now all of a sudden they need to be elected, and they've scrubbed their names from there. There you go.
Yeah.
Just a little whitewash, right? And EV stuff, Texas lawmakers proposing felony charges for damaging Tesla chargers. Texas lawmakers have advanced legislation that would make, yeah, so they're starting to catch these people. Again, the do stupid things, win stupid prizes. People have to realize that Teslas have like 8 cameras. So while you're keying it, kicking it, spitting on it, doing all those things, you're famous. They're putting you on the internet and making you famous. So if that's the kind of fame you're looking for, I don't know if that's such a great idea.
Yeah, I mean, it's no surprise that Texas is doing this because that's where Tesla's based now, and the Texans are not going to let you damage their industry, are they? They're going to react,
and they also have
angrily to that.
I think they have a town in Texas named. You want to take a guess?
What, Tesla?
No. Starbase. Just like out of a
Yeah.
sci-fi movie, Starbase, which is for SpaceX, right? A town created
That's
for SpaceX.
Boca Chica, isn't it? Right next to Mexico.
There you go. We got some memes here. We always like to end the show with some fun, and kind of like our friends at Babylon Bee, obviously. And your old friend Sir Elton John showed up at the White House there. Or is that Evel Knievel? I'm not sure. Is that Evel Knievel or is that Elton John? But I did see on there this outfit now tops Elvis Presley when he was at the White House with Richard M. Nixon, and
Yeah.
and he had the pop collars. You know, Elvis is in his latter years. Elvis definitely had put on a little more weight, and his outfits were a little more flamboyant with the cape and everything. And then Kid Rock. This is Kid Rock actually trying to take away that from Elvis Presley. I think he might have won though too, right? That outfit is pretty crazy. And we talked about Cory Booker yesterday with that filibuster, but most wives say they can break that easily.
25 hours. That's quite easy, isn't it?
of a lecture, why you can't go golfing on Sunday. Right?
Yeah.
And then we got this clip here, and this is just like we're gonna play this clip, and it just makes no sense to me. Hey, that's good, Rommel. That's good. But anyway, it seems like some people, and including goats, can't resist going back into the fire.
Yeah. They're just attracted to the flames, aren't they? And they have to jump in and be burned.
Make from that what you want. Like some people just keep doing the same thing. I think Einstein said it, didn't he? Albert Einstein. Keep doing the same thing, expecting different results is what insanity looks like.
Yeah, definition of insanity.
There you go. And this goat definitely showing you how it works. And then we'll end with this, and I think this should be a meme. We're going to play this clip here. We interviewed Sean Fraser here, the housing minister. I think this will become a meme, I think, actually. So we're going to play it as a meme.
I came to Ottawa this morning from my home province of Nova Scotia, where our communities are literally on fire. Thousands upon thousands of families have been displaced from their homes. Hundreds are watching as their homes may be turned into ashes. 8 months ago, Hurricane Fiona damaged our communities beyond measure, displacing not just homes, but sweeping people out to sea in some instances. Mr. Speaker, the Conservatives are peddling policies that they know will increase the level of pollution that is causing these severe weather events. We have one planet, Mr. Speaker. It is my home. It is yours. I will not stand idly by and watch it burn.
There you go. And all of a sudden,
Wow.
they're willing to watch it burn. And also, wasn't it Mark Miller says you couldn't even go on a holiday, right? Said you weren't even allowed to drive your car. And Stephen Jabot said, no more roads in Canada. And Karina Gold said, we need to figure out a way to landlock Alberta's resources. All of those make great memes today, right?
It was. I'll defend Mark Miller's honor there. It was actually Mark Holland.
Oh, I got the marks wrong.
Secretary.
The two marks. Sorry, I was wondering about it. So Mark Holland said that. Yeah, it's quite the rant too, right? On how you shouldn't be going. I think he's blaming Pierre Poilievre because he took his motorhome or something. Wasn't it or something? Drove his motorhome somewhere?
It's because he was putting out. Yeah, he was putting out like political videos. And he was in a kind of like Winnebago thing, and he was driving around. I don't know where. I think it was Quebec or something like that. I drove from Ottawa to the Maritimes or something like that. Yeah, and Mark Holland with his little bow tie, he did not like it.
And then we also had Chrystia Freeland saying that she doesn't even need a car. Nobody should need a car. That she just rides the subway and her bike everywhere she goes. She failed to mention that she has a chauffeur-driven limousine that drives her around, and then she flies everywhere on the taxpayer dime. But all of these would make great memes now, right? And we play this one next to Mona there. That's, like with that big smile, great smile Mona has too, talking about how great it is that the Carney Liberals have now removed the carbon tax so you can enjoy a better life. Well,
yeah, you could even have a vacation. You could even drive. You could drive to Nova Scotia.
According to Sean Fraser here, the world is on fire, and that's the end of it now because we're not doing the carbon tax. And Stephen Jabot doesn't want to build any roads. So why are we protecting the auto industry? Is a really good question, because if there's no roads, what do you need a car for?
Exactly. Yeah, it's a very good question.
So that leads us full circle back to you. How is your car doing?
My car is still very much dead, and I'm waiting on my friends at Kia to say whether or not they're going to fix their faulty engine that exploded for no reason.
You should play these clips to your wife and say, we will not own a car because we don't need one, because there's not going to be any roads anyway. There will be no roads. Again, this is our comedy section. Make what you want out of it. But I don't know if they said these things in comedy, but I think they make great memes now, though.
Yeah, I mean, the saddest thing is, and just to bring us back to reality, the sadness of reality. They said these things, in my opinion, because they believe them, and they've suspended these things because they want to be re-elected and they want to keep their jobs. So then you should wonder in a couple of years' time, if they do win this election, as it looks like they're going to, do you think they're going to do the thing that they believe in, or do you think they're going to do the thing that they did temporarily to win the election? I have a feeling it will be the former, and we can anticipate all kinds of green taxes and all kinds of things that you personally can do or not do to save the planet.
Are you trying to say, do you want to be the goat here?
There's an abundance of goats in this country.
And not the goat, the greatest of all time, but the goat that seems to want to jump back into the fire. Even when you pull him out and show him a better way, the goat says, no, I need to go into the fire. It's comfortable.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's our show for today. We do thank you for watching Now Media. We do thank you for the comments and for especially the regulars that keep showing up. That's amazing. Really thankful for that. And we're here 5 days a week. We try to get going at 9 a.m. Try to make it around an hour. Usually goes over a little bit. And we also replay it later on the site. And you'll find us on YouTube. We ask that you subscribe, share. Actually share, get it out there if you like what we're doing. Get more people watching it. That'd be greatly appreciated. again, we get zero funding from the government, so it's all about you. And we do thank you for watching Now Media.
We don't just report the news. We live here too. We're your neighbors, bringing you stories that matter to all of us. No government funding, no outside influence. Kelowna Now, local, independent. News you can trust.